What is up, everyone? This is your host, Eric Holtzman, and welcome to the Mindful Motion Podcast. What's up, everybody? I'm here with Steve Van Zandt, one of my friends. We've done quite a few classes together back in the day, and we're going to talk about hidden resistance in exercise, maintaining joint health, force, inertia, and pre- and post-surgical considerations. Steve is a father. He's also an Army veteran. He's the owner of a SBC Performance in Sunrise, Florida, where he mainly helps people restore their muscle health, motor control, and strength by designing custom-tailored exercise that's really like nothing else you've ever seen. He's made some amazing modifications to equipment to basically give people the best exercise experience they can get. He works with sensitive demographics, and he's a really intelligent guy. He's also an instructor for RTS, an amazing course created by Purvis on basically everything that is exercise mechanics, anatomy, and helping trainers become the best trainers they can be. And I wanted to kick this off, just kind of talk about your story, Steve, where you came from, how you got into the fitness industry, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you having me on. I as you mentioned before, I got into the industry. I was in the military for a while. I joined directly after high school. I did 3 years with the 3rd Infantry Division in the U.S. Army. And then upon my ETS, I started the journey. I knew I wanted to be in the exercise field. I started taking courses, which what most people do. It's they get into the exercise science realm. I was taking my undergraduate courses for that. But kind of early on in the process, I got recalled back into the military yet again. This little small print that they have in there. I got recalled in, and I did another year and a half, including a year in Iraq from about 2005 to 2006. So that delayed my journey a bit, but at the same time, once I got out officially for good, that the hunger, that drive, that discipline for achieving what I wanted to achieve just was big. I mean, partially probably because I fell a little bit behind with time, but I finished the degree, and man, things just evolved. I mean, got the degree and got a really cool internship right out of college, started working with these professional athletes and got into more of the strength conditioning type world, but then found a job in more of the one-on-one personal training world, where I still work with a lot of athletes and whatnot. But around 2010, 11 is when I got introduced to the RTS course, and we had a couple instructors fly down here, and just was like a complete matrix moment. I say, like, just incredible course. I thought it was just like a complete awakening in terms of my perspective on it. And I just went down this rabbit hole that never ended. And here I am. That's 12, 13 years later. I'm an instructor for the course. But since then, I started building up the business. I was still working on personal growth, taking certifications through organizations beyond what the normal industry would offer, really get into the mechanic aspect of exercise. And then I decided, in order to deliver the experience I thought exercise needed to be, I needed to really open up my own facility. There's no other place I felt that offered it the way I wanted to do it. And so that's what I did. I opened up a facility and was there 5 years. And then for the past 3 years, we've upgraded to a great facility here in Sunrise. It's twice the space. And now I have a massage therapist working here. I have some physical therapy office in here, and I'm working on growing the training staff. But it's come a long way. That's kind of the short version of it, but it's just how things have been rolling, right? And I've just been lucky to kind of just meet people through all walks of life and through this industry that's kind of developed me who I am today. And it's just still going, man. I'm still just kind of riding this wave and see where it goes.
Yeah, man, totally. It's funny. I have a similar take on why I started my business. I mean, people always ask me, why did you do that kind of work somewhere. And it's the same thing for me. It's like there's not enough gyms and fitness studios that think of exercise the way that we think about it. And for some people, that's a make it or break it. It's the thing
Yeah.
that allows them to train without pain or creating problems. So I think that's awesome. But yes, it comes with some challenges, doesn't it?
Yeah, I tell you, and the interesting thing about all that, man, is since I've been teaching, I'll get a lot of students from Miami, which is a really hot spot for fitness, right? I mean, you think of Miami, you think of people aesthetically just walking on the beach and wanting to look good, and that's obviously not how we just look at exercise. But I get a lot of trainers from there that work at these big gyms with a lot of other trainers, and when they go through the course and they come out with this total different perspective on it, it's amazing how much they grow within these places and they outgrow these facilities, and then they come into the same issue. But their personal growth is huge. It's huge, and a lot of them end up opening their own places, right? Which is good, and I like to see that because that means they're starting to make some positive changes in the industry, and we're starting to see people carry on the message we're sending here, that this personal training thing is more than what is being offered out there by these these organizations.
100%. And we're going to go over some of those pieces of what is more exactly mean. But I'm kind of curious, like I'm personally curious, why are you so passionate about exercise? What is it about exercise that like gets you so excited?
I mean, I've always enjoyed it. I mean, I know it's a bit a cliche to say, since a young boy, I enjoyed it from a consumer perspective of growing up, and I was always playing sports, and it probably just started out with an insecurity, just being this skinny kid, and you wanted to put some muscle on, and you wanted to be stronger and look better and all that. So I've always had like a like for it, but it grew into a passion or a mastery over the course of years. I just find the body itself it's a fascinating thing, man. I just think its ability to change and adapt, the mental and physical benefits of it. I mean, it's almost magical what it can be. And I think health in essence is still the most important thing that you can have, right? Without it, your economic status and whatever else you got going in your life, without health, it really doesn't mean all that much. So it's just always been something that I think is really incredibly important, and it's just very impactful, and it could be life-changing for people if it's applied correctly.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's that adage, right? It's kind of funny, but it's health is wealth, right? It's really is pivotal. I mean, nothing worse than working your whole life, saving for retirement, and then retirement comes and you can't do any of the things you wanted to do.
Yeah. I see it all the time, man. Those are the people that walk in the door all the time.
Yeah, and well, the great news is no matter how deconditioned you are, how old you are, there's never too late to start making changes. That's what's so beautiful about it, for sure. So everyone's got their own definition of exercise. You ask Greg Mack, and he's got this crazy long paragraph with lots of disclaimers and things. And then I got my definition. I'm wondering what your definition of exercise is.
Dude, I mean, there are a lot of good ones, right? I mean, you could write a paragraph on it because I've heard several ones that I'm like, I really like it. It's almost easier to talk about what it's not. I would say one of the ones I like is it's just a set of goal-specific stimuli with the appropriate amounts of force and frequency. And I think the word appropriate has to be in the definition somewhere. It's got to be in there somewhere. That's the essence of it. Because, in fact, I'll ask a kind of one of these questions in class, and it seems like a stupid question. It's just to get people pondering that. Do you think exercise is good for you? And people, they give you that look like, of course it's good for you. It's exercise, right? And it's like, well, I get people in here all the time that come in all messed up as a result of exercising, right? You got those who don't do it at all, and therefore it's the lack of it is causing issues. You got people who exercise with a complete inappropriate amounts of frequency and this kind of mindless approach to it, and it's all the benefits that are supposed to come out of it are actually doing the complete opposite to them. So it has to be appropriate. I've heard the technical definition, like training internal force production in response to external force application to produce a desired outcome. I've heard that one too, right? And that works. But I think the definition really is a conversation, a talk, sitting down with whoever's in front of you and figuring out what it is to them and what they want to get out of it. But I cannot define anything as exercise unless it's appropriate and strategic, and that each session builds off on the previous one and sets you up for the next one, so that you understand that this is a lifelong thing. This is not just something you can dabble in, get to a mountaintop and maintain it all. I mean, this exercise it is a lifestyle in a sense. It is a thing. And I think the way we approach it makes it more tolerable for people to want to do it long term.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, it's funny, man. Some of the most brilliant health influencers out there, like Inertia and amongst many others, who are brilliant scientists and physiologists, and they understand the body great. We talked about this, but like, there's not ever really that mention of tolerance and appropriateness. Like, they'll suggest do 300 minutes of zone 2 cardio a week, and it's like, wow, that's, if you don't do any, like, you're going to go from 0 to 300 minutes. There's not really a discussion around that, and I understand that it's not their job to talk about all those nuanced details, but it should be at least in the mix, and I guess that's what we're trying to put out there. You know, there are a lot of facets of exercise, and some of which are really focused on like reps, weights, things like that. But I don't feel like the fundamental component of like force. What is force? Like, that's never really talked about. I think people could benefit from having a general idea of what that is. Could you describe what force is? And man, might be important to understand that.
It's everything. It's absolutely everything when it comes to exercise. You're right, man. It's amazing. I went through the whole exercise science degree and did all the little steps you should take if you're serious about making a career in this. And I can't recall really any course just talking about it, right? You know, we're worried about the physiology behind exercise and the Krebs cycles and fast twitch versus slow twitch fibers and all these things. And then yet when it's time to actually have somebody in front of you and apply force to someone's body, we're not thinking in those terms. We're just making people do memorized exercises with a perceived benefit to it. But force, if we're going to define it, it's simply a push or a pull exerted on one object to another. And you could argue a push and a pull is the same thing. It's all perspective based. But I think when people hear the word force, like your average person hears it, they think force is a lot, like forceful, right? Something's being crushed, forceful. What do you mean force? It's like, well, there's a magnitude to force, but force can be very, very light, could be a lot, right? But force is just force. The key is how much force is appropriate and how is it applied to the body to assure that you're getting the best out of your exercise experience. Because force doesn't just have an amount, it has a direction. And that will determine how it influences an object. So if we're applying to the body, you have joints and you have forces on your joints. And well, what do your joints do? And there are these exercises considering what the structural realities of what's happening inside the body, because a poor force could lead to undesired outcomes, right? So when you're exercising, you got this internal force production in response to an applied external force, and it's used as an agent of change. Well, what kind of change do you want is the question, right? I could have a hammer and hit you on the forehead for about 10 years and grow a unicorn, from very specifically applied force. I don't think that's the outcome you're looking for, right?
Well, maybe something.
So, I mean, force, it's a deep discussion. We talk about it in detail in the RTS course. But I try to, when I'm talking to my clients, is talk to them about it in a very simple, digestible way, and a way they can understand it. But it's everything, man. Force is there no matter what. And it's just a matter of you being able to understand and how to apply it. And that starts with understanding the body, just from the simple perspective of joint structure and function, and then muscle anatomy and all these things. And once you understand that, you can really start thinking internally what you're doing to someone, rather than just, here, let's do this thing, cross fingers, let's hope everything works out for the best, which is often how it's applied.
Sure. Yeah. And I guess there's that other component, right, with force, that is magnitude, but it also has something to do with speed, I imagine, too. And I find myself every session all day long saying, slow down to people. And I think once I show them what a 5-pound weight can be with the scale when you move it quickly, it's sort of an aha moment. So if you guys have never seen this, you can take a 5-pound weight and attach it to some sort of like luggage scale, and you can move it around slowly or quickly, and it will show you how it's changing. And people are always dumbfounded when they see a 5-pound weight actually being 30 pounds when you abruptly change it. And this sort of segues into this notion of inertia, often conflated with momentum. Those are a little different, but we can use them interchangeably just for today if you want to make it easier. But, what is inertia exactly? Maybe you can shed light on that, give us a definition, and then what kind of role does it play in exercise, for better or for worse?
Well, inertia is just defined as resistance to change. It's not a force thing. It's a property of mass. But I do the same thing you do, right? Actually, I just have one right here. Get these little fish scale. And I do this for clients too, because the first session is really me explaining how I differ and how I approach exercise and how it's going to help the person. And some of these people, like I said, have come from other places where they've exercised a long time, and some have not. In fact, it's easier to teach this to people who don't have much of a background in this exercise, because they're not conflicting in their brains with all these things. They've had these beliefs and they're trying to now process what I'm saying. But yeah, I take one of these little scales, and same thing, we'll hook up a little 10-pound weight to it just to prove it's 10 pounds. So it's not some magic trick where I actually have a 50-pound weight with a 10 like written on it. And then we just go through some curls, man. I just start kind of jacking around some curls, and I show them afterwards, and it shows, hey, this thing weighed 40 pounds at some point through that. And I'll ask them, like, what do you think made that happen? And we once in a while get a smarty pants that's got some kind of engineering background, but most people are just perplexed, like, I don't know. And so I, without getting too technical about it, I try to explain to them, look, there's a braking component, an acceleration and deceleration. If I had to take that 10-pound weight and I launch it at you from across the room, or I hand it to you, it's going to be a much different thing, right? So when I'm letting that weight, that 10 pounds kind of just fall, and you're catching it, it's that 10 pounds plus all that acceleration that you're trying to break. And many times is what's breaking it isn't so much your control and your muscles, it's your joints is locking out into your elbow, locking out into extension. And I think most people can see that if I sit here and snap my elbow Steven Skull style, 25 times, it's probably not going to feel good, and you wonder why you leave the gym kind of going, oh, geez, I don't know what I did there. But I show that we could quadruple this thing. And there's also a point in there where you can make this weight weigh nothing, right? We can launch this thing at the bottom of the curl, can kind of launch this thing from our hips, just ride the wave, and the arm will keep going until something stops it. And if it's just you smashing it into your body, that's not your muscles doing it, really. So it doesn't really matter how many reps we're doing if they all are just, most of them are just are wasted. And in fact, there might be more detriment than there are benefits to this thing. So it's an actual physics reason. Just telling someone to slow down in the just say because it's great form. I want them to know why. We're actually changing the amount of resistance your body has to work with against, and that's much more than what that little number says on there. Mm-hmm. So if you get little grandmas in there and you're saying, hey, I'm going to give you a 40-pound dumbbell, let's go, they're going to think you're insane, right? But yeah, you can give them a 5 or 10 pound one and it could easily become 40. I mean, it's how you're controlling these things. And this inertia thing is going to apply to every exercise we do. So then we go through it again, and I do it with a lot of control, and I'm really focused on contracting. And you see how that 10 pounds is it just stays on that 10 because you're controlling the inertia. And I'm like, hey, that's happening in every single exercise we do. So there's a reason behind it. And that kind of just sets up in the ground levels of understanding what I'm saying, stop this, hold that. So they understand the whys. I want them to understand why we're doing what we're doing. And then they immediately see and feel the difference and the benefit. Might mean dropping the resistance a bit, right? But there's an ego thing there. But that's, in the end of the day, you were never lifting that much anyway. It was just you were just launching it around.
Yeah, I mean it's quite disturbing and alarming when you think doing a 200-pound barbell squat might be 800 pounds if you're dropping and catching it.
At the bottom, and then you get on one of those nice YouTube reels or something where you can't get up and you crash it and pass out at the bottom.
Yeah, that's not probably great for health. Certainly not for joints. And so, like, what way can these inertial properties, like, when you say it brings potential harm to joints, right? And we're trying to maybe maintain joint health long term. I mean, what kind of issues can come up when maybe you're not owning the weight and you're letting these inertial properties kind of jump in unknowingly?
Well, I mean, you can have an injury, but this could be something that's accumulating over time too. I mean, look, you can get away with doing really poor executed exercise for a long time, but eventually they're not having issues happening inside. You're not looking in the joint. I look at it like this. I look at it like smoking, right? And if you've ever been in one of these body exhibits where you see they have all the cadavers there and you can see they have no skin. You can see all the muscles on the bodies. They're really cool. Somewhere in there, they had the lungs and the impact of smoking on the lungs and how blackened they are. And then they have a little place where you can throw your cigarettes away. But people were disgusted when they're looking at it like, oh my God. So people deciding to quit right then and there. And I just wonder sometimes if we could see inside like the daily toll of these crummy forces over time, just accumulating, developing arthritis, bone spurs, all these things. We might look at this a lot different, but we're not thinking like that. We're thinking we're watching skin move. We're just doing things for X amount of reps or X amount of sets because, the program, we're not thinking of progressing properly. We're just trying to follow whatever workout. Well, I ripped out this magazine. Do the Rock's workout, 6 weeks. You'll look like him. No, you won't. By the way, the Rock's had about 75 surgeries. So it's hard to get people to understand that. And they don't usually appreciate it until they start feeling really crummy or they can no longer do the things they were doing before. And then they start questioning it. And then when they all say the same thing, I wish I knew now what I knew 20 years ago. I say it too. But we can start changing it now. And once you go exercise mindfully, which is a great name, by the way, mindful motion, you'll never go back to the other way again. It's just, I don't see how you could. It's a completely different sensation. And you start actually enjoying exercise more. And then guess what? You want to come back and do it again. And that's the whole damn point, isn't it? To want to return and keep building and building, not having this thing you're just, I got to work out today. It's Monday, right? Rather than that, I'd rather have you looking forward to saying, man, I'm feeling great. I can't wait to do this again. Man, you get that. That's the hardest part, right? It's showing up.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy because, you probably run into this as you bring these things up with someone maybe who's healthy, but there's really no motivation to consider this stuff because, well, I feel fine. What's the problem? Like you say, there's no way to look at the objective truth. Not yet, at least. Maybe in the near future, there'll be like a mobile MRI on your phone and you can just scan yourself or something. But
yeah, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like people do have to have some sort of real life trauma of some kind, physical, emotional, whatever, that would drive them to make a change in their current approach. But sadly, that's kind of the way it goes for a lot of things. You know, I don't want to get too intense with details here, but I do feel like mentioning a little more on force and talking about this really cool piece of exercise, which is a moment arm. And even for trainers out there and the layperson, understanding this, it can get a little hairy and complicated, but it doesn't have to be. It can be somewhat simple too. Maybe you can explain it in a simple way, what a moment
Yeah.
arm, and maybe give a couple examples of how it shows up in an exercise.
Yeah, man. So after I get done showing the whole inertia thing, that's my next conversation with somebody. If you're a trainer out there listening, you know, we in the course we talk about this in detail. And your moment arm is, you know, you have an axis of rotation with whatever joint you're using, and I'll tend to use like the shoulder. And I don't know if you can even see my arm through this thing, but and then you have a weight in your hand, and you got a line of force. Basically, wherever that resistance is trying to bring you, you have this line, and then the axis of rotation where this joint's pivoting around. The distance between those two things, that perpendicular distance, is considered your moment arm. It's just how much torque is on the joint. So if you're holding a dumbbell or something to your side and you're just kind of standing there and it's hanging out, and I'll give them whatever, 10-pound weight, 5-pound weight. I said, you could probably do that all day, right? And like, yeah, I mean, the only thing that's really going to give out over time would be your grip, you know, to your shoulder. If it's just kind of hanging out to your side, there's no resistance, right? It's balanced right through. But as you start lifting that arm, the further and further away that resistance gets from your shoulder, the heavier that dumbbell gets, to the point where when you have it straight out to the side at a 90-degree angle, that's the heaviest point it gets. Can't get any further away than that. If you continue to go, that weight actually gets closer to the shoulder again, and it gets lighter. That's happening again in every exercise. Nobody talks about it or looks at it. So that's another massive influence. You take that with the inertia discussion, and then you see people now in the gym throwing lateral raises out, you know, and you think about what's really happening there. I've tried to use analogies maybe to get people to understand it a bit better. If you've ever seen someone push a car, you're pushing a car in neutral, and how hard it is in the beginning to get started, and as you keep going, it gets a little easier. That's one of the ones I use to just talk about inertia. With moment arm, I was a mechanic in the Army, and I thought, man, you know, when you change a tire and you can't crack the lug nut, right, and you're putting force, you just can't break it. And one of the tricks was you put a pipe over the wrench, and then you're a little bit further away from where the socket is on the bolt, and you can crack it. And then I realized, like, nobody under the age of like 30 has ever changed their own tire, so they're like, I don't get it. So, but I'm not pushing on this thing any harder. I'm just having I would create a longer lever, and I'm pushing on it, and now have more torque onto this thing. And that's happening in exercise everywhere. And we joke about it in RTS. Once you see them, you'll never stop seeing them. You'll walk around the airport and look at and see people's, you know, it's wild. But when you understand these things, you can adjust forces on someone's body to make an exercise feel completely different than they've ever experienced, in a way that they leave going, wow, that feels amazing. Like, these joint forces aren't crummy. My muscles are fatigued, almost shockingly tired with what they would consider little volume, because we're cleaning up all this unseen nonsense that was happening. And they're so much more efficient with what they're doing. And the beauty of that is, man, what's the number one excuse for not exercising, man? I mean, it's usually people say, I don't have time. And then I see all these people wasting it in the gym. And so now when we're this efficient at doing exercise, they're like 1-2 sets. You're like, holy crap! It felt like I did 10 of these things, right? Mm-hmm. But that's a great thing, man. And we don't have to do 7,000 repetitions to get to where you need to get if we're really efficient with this stuff. So moment arm's huge. Obviously, we talk about inertia and moment arm, which much greater detail in class. But I do try to get my new clients, to understand that in a bit, so that they appreciate the perspective I'm coming from. I'd rather them know the reasoning why we're doing things the way we do it for their benefit, rather than me just saying do it because I said so. So that's the short version without detail, as you asked.
Yeah. It's empowering to give people the real objective truth about things, because honestly, we want to give them autonomy so that they can exercise too, and they can't make better choices if they don't understand why they're making the choices in the first place, right? So I think the education piece is often left, at the wayside, and it's kind of a disservice to people for sure.
Yeah. So rather than like between sets talking about what happened on American Idol last night or something, and try to explain what it is, what we're doing here, and why this is beneficial to them, right? Use that time for education. I don't think trainers are really taking the time to educate. In fact, unfortunately, a lot of them they don't even know why they're doing what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Or they're insecure about it, and when they are asked, they give these really convoluted answers using big words to try to trick the client into thinking they know something they don't. Man, you got to talk to people like just people, right? Like, why are we doing this? And then they go, that makes a lot of sense. Like, they appreciate that. They appreciate that. Like, I'm explaining to them that I have a thought process behind what we're doing, and that makes them feel like they're actually getting value out of these sessions.
Yeah, and then now we've talked about two influences that basically make a 10-pound weight not 10 pounds, depending on how you move it, how fast you move it, and how far away it is from the joints that you're working around. So that's a groundbreaking idea for a lot of people. And this kind of segues to another part of what I wanted to discuss, which is the hidden resistance in exercise. Well, we talked about two of them, but then I'm sure there's a lot of other ones we could talk about, but I wanted to maybe touch base on frictional forces, because that is happening in a ton of different exercises, almost all of them in some way or another. But definitely more in some, like hip bridges and leg presses, bench press, maybe talking about how friction influences an exercise, and maybe going through like an example of what it might do, might change.
You're right. It shows up a lot. It's one of those hidden things, right? But it's there whether you see it or you don't. So it's funny when someone says, "I've never seen that." Like, you never look for that. You don't see things you don't know are there. You got to be able to look for it, and I see it all the time. And you mentioned glute bridges or hip bridges, whatever you want to call them. That's a pretty easy example to talk about, because I think most people who have at least a casual understanding of exercise have done that. It's like one of everybody's favorite ones. Women love doing it. It's glutes focused, hamstring focused. So someone's laying on their back and they're just kind of lifting their butt in the air is usually what they're doing to the beat of a drum, really, which isn't the best way to do it, but you get the idea. They're coming up, they're trying to do hip extension, but when you're placing their feet down, their knees are bent. Depending on the surface they're on, right? Just imagine doing it on ice. Just imagine doing that on ice, and how your feet would just slide forward, right? Well, what would be preventing that? Well, that's happening anyway. Like, that's not ice, but if you're on the floor or something, there's a frictional force trying to straighten your knee out, and you have to resist that. Essentially, like a leg extension. Like, you're fighting with your knee extensors, your feet sliding. So there's that frictional force, and I'm pretty sure that's not the goal behind that exercise, but it's there. So knowing that information and knowing that's there some things we can do to modify the exercise so that's less influential. And if you're doing that and it's like, oh, I've done that exercise, it bothers my knee. And no one can figure out why. Like, I don't get it. It's not a quad exercise. Well, it kind of is. I mean, there's things that you're just not seeing. And once you can see it, we can start doing things to change that, and changes this exercise completely. We just tend to look at where the weight is and it's moving up and down in space, right? But that's a force. That is a force that's happening there. And yeah, you see it on other exercises. Sometimes we can actually use it to our advantage, like intentionally shove against certain things when you're benching and squeezing the bar in or squeezing it out, depending whatever the goal might be. You can totally change the sensation because you're creating a force beyond just what you're seeing with your eyes, which is the cable or the dumbbell or whatever moving up and down. So that's another thing we explore deeply in RTS. It's kind of like giving you X-ray vision, man, like a superpower. Now you're starting to see these things that you were blind to before, and we're just taking the blinders off is all we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, if you guys want to play around with this frictional thing, just to get an experience of it, do a bench press with the bar, shove out as hard as you can, and it will become a back exercise.
Crazy. I remember the first time. That's actually one of the first things when I took RTS forever ago. I couldn't even wrap my brain on the concept of doing a push-up without really having your chest engage at all. I couldn't even digest that. And now it's just duh, right? It's obvious, but it's amazing. Like, yeah, you can. It totally is. I mean, it's just nothing's happening here, and I'm doing basically with my triceps. But it took a lot of intention and a lot of focus to do it. It was just an example. I'm not suggesting anyway that's a great exercise for you. That's a whole other thing. But it really proves a point. Like what you see, it can be deceiving to what the reality that's happening.
Mm-hmm. Now, don't do this mindlessly with a lot of weight because you could hurt yourself. But as an experiment with like little to no load, it can be fun. You recently had a shoulder surgery.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear about that. Like, how's it going? I saw you were working on some stuff. Like, what was your experience like? The rehab that you've had to go to, the pitfalls of it. How your expertise came into the mix, where if you didn't have it, what would have happened?
No, it's funny, man. That's actually my first ever orthopedic surgery. I never had surgery before, but I was having some discomfort in my shoulder for years. I was strong and I could do everything I wanted to do, but it's a little just more irritating. So I finally decided to get an MRI, and I had a slap tear, which is just a labrum tear. It was pretty significant. I probably had it for a long time. Look, before I got into this exercise realm and all that, I was, like I said, I used to just beast everything in the military. I played sports, worked out, stupid, just like everything I'm criticizing now. So this could just be something that was just kind of a ticking time bomb. And I thought, I'm not getting any younger. Let me just go ahead. I'll get this surgery. And it was a bit of a bummer because I hate being limited, but the other part of me was excited because I get to play with this thing now. I get to try to rehab myself and see what I can do. And it was funny because I'm sitting there with the ortho, and the first thing he says is, don't do anything for like 2 months, basically, like this. And I'm like, there's no way that's happening. Don't lift any more than 5 pounds, he says. And then we just got done talking about it. Like, wow, are we talking 5 pounds of load, 5 pounds of resistance? What are we talking here? So I think he got the idea that I was a little different. And he's like, why don't you just take it easy? I'm like, got it. Take it easy. Okay. And so I was in the sling for about a week. I couldn't take it beyond that. I was just really, it's more, you don't really need it. It was more just a awareness of not to do something stupid. Like you just react, something's falling off the shelf, you catch it, But I have this probably unrealistic, I have this unrealistic belief that I'm going to heal half the time everybody else is going to heal. So when he tells me it'll be 6 months, I'm like, it'll be 3. Well, no, I'm still kind of dealing with some of the repercussions of it, but overall it was going really great. I got range of motion back really quickly. And then just understanding, progressing slowly. And by the way, I went into the surgery getting as strong as I possibly could prior to even getting the surgery, this is something for people to know. If you're going to have surgery, like don't hold off on strength training if possible before, because it will help you recover better. So I went in there really strong, and then just using what I know, able to build up strength around the joint without doing anything crazy. But that's been about 6 months ago, and I have full range. It's still got a little bit of inflammation in there and all that, which I'm working on. But it's good. I think it's a good educational experience for me to have that and build it. It helps with the perspective when someone else comes in with these things. Like I've lived it. I kind of can relate. I think so. From that aspect, it was good. I mean, no one likes getting surgery. It wasn't something I wanted, but I looked at it as a positive from that aspect, that it's a learning opportunity. And I like the challenge of kind of starting from scratch and building up from there.
Yeah, I've had my own, and it does help you relate to people who go through that. You mentioned taking the sling off earlier, trying to do things as soon as possible. And I know I'm not saying people should do that without any knowledge or
Right.
take your doctor's
Right.
advice, but there does seem to be sometimes a little too much tenderness to get moving again. And when we think about cutting a tissue and reshaping the materials, laying down the tissue, making sure it's healing properly and coming back quicker, it does seem like movement and some sort of stimulation through contraction is sort of helpful in aiding that process. But a lot of people don't do that, or they do it way later. I guess I'm just curious if did you feel like what did it look like for you? Did you start the first week, started doing little things, or did you wait a month? Like, when did you start actually applying?
Yeah, I took about a week where I didn't do much. And then the second week, I was already just doing some really, really easy, like passive motion stuff that's really, really light. Take them out of their arm, just moving around. I actually had somebody, I do have a therapist here, just kind of just gentle moving it through some ranges. But I say within a couple weeks, 3 weeks, I started applying some really light force. And that goes back to our first question, right? It's like, I'm not suggesting we go out there week 3 and I'm bench pressing, that's not where I'm going with this, but to do nothing can also be a problem. And it creates apprehension too. When people are told, don't do this, don't do that, don't do that, don't lift, don't grab a coffee cup. Like, even when the tissue heals, some of this, I think this thought that I'm going to get hurt can create pain in itself. This apprehension, this being scared to do anything. It's like, your body's very robust. It's all about the appropriate amount of force. So putting the appropriate amount of force on it, right? So very, very, easy ranges I could control, right? It would just maybe going out about 10 degrees, 15 degrees of abduction, doing things in that plane, fine. And over time, I get a little bit more range. And you gotta be patient with it, right? And work with what you have available to you. I can't force what I'd like to have. This is what I have, and this is what I get to work with. And then do enough to show up for the next day and do it again. That is progression. That's a lesson in exercise, man. I mean, it's doing nothing isn't very helpful. Doing too much isn't helpful. Somewhere in between, there's the appropriate amount of stimulus that helps healing, that helps recovery. And it's a really good lesson about how you should approach things in terms of your overall exercise perspective. Like, just building little blocks over time, and over time, man, you build a huge house, man. It just doesn't happen overnight. I get impatient like anybody else does. I want to go out there and just kill things. It's still in me. It's old habits die hard, but you'll pay the price. If you do too much, you'll regress, right? So that's it sucked, but it's fun from the educational perspective, right?
Yeah, I can totally understand that. Everybody who trains wants to progress, wants to get better, wants to do it quickly. Understanding your advice and patience is huge. I have a big poster in my gym that says patience, just to remind me, because I have the same issue. I still struggle with this. I guess I'm curious, we both follow this rule of micro progression. You're kind of outlining it with what you're talking about after your surgery. Maybe if you have some personal insights, professional insights on how you describe appropriateness and progressing in a micro fashion, and how someone can determine if they're doing that well or if they're going off course and not following that. Like, what kind of signals might they feel or see within their training, recovery, and so on.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have been led to believe that some of the effects of exercise that aren't necessarily good are appropriate, right? soreness, excessive soreness, can't walking down the stairs backwards and all this stuff. And wow, what a killer workout. And, we know that that's a sign of injury, that is not an appropriate progression. In fact, I think the best way to explain that is these analogies. We have a perfect analogy that Tom talks about in RTS, right? I think everybody can kind of relate to this suntan sunburn thing, right? So, we're down here in Florida. It's about 8 billion degrees lately, man, right? And there's New Yorkers are coming down here in their summer vacations. They're all pale and they try to go out to the beach. And it takes about 10 minutes to become a lobster, right? So they want to play out in the sand all day because they don't get to do it where they live. And they can barely move the next day, right? They're completely sunburned. And what happens is when that happens, you have to avoid going out until you recover and heal, right? Now, had they just maybe went out for a few minutes and then the next day a few more minutes and the next day a few more minutes, right? By the end of their vacation, they may have been able to tolerate most of the day out there with some sunscreen, of course, and not feel burnt. But they start seeing a tan develop, even though they don't think they were out in the sun long enough in those first few days. It means they've already developed an adaptation, regardless of they didn't have to get burnt to get there, right? But their body started adapting, started building up a tolerance. And that's the same way we look at exercise, man. I just see people getting sunburn all the time. They get sunburn and then, do 8,000 chest exercises every Monday. And then by the time they heal, it's next Monday. And, that's just the way they've grown up thinking that's how the best way to do it. It's like, well, I would like you to be able to revisit this a little sooner, which means you got to recover, which means we can't just demolish yours every time you go in there. It's a hard concept for people, especially if you were an athlete or somebody who's just kind of all in. You had to redirect their focus from just doing it to, can you take all that that drive, that primal rage of exercise and focus it on just doing this with control and making it harder internally and seeing if we can overcome those challenges. But that's probably the best way, simple way to talk about progression, right? That's a great analogy. You want to be able to come back and do it again. You have to build a base. Each exercise session needs to prepare you for the next one and the next one and the next one. And in all reality, man, progress isn't linear. You're not going to forever get better every day. There's life. You're going to go down and you're going to go up. As long as the trajectory is up in the long haul, you're on the right track, man. There's going to be days where you got a little more burnt than you wanted to. It's okay, but let's not aim for that. Let's not try to get sunburned every time we go. That's going to catch up to you. Those are my clients now, right? The ones that did that when they were young and now they can't do it.
Yeah, I mean, Nike really screwed with our heads.
Yeah.
Do it.
Just do it. How about do it with control? Do it with some mindfulness.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't have the same ring, I guess.
It's definitely tricky, man. I mean, I even with my understanding still have issues with that. It's confusing, I think, because you feel like you can do this thing, you're performing and you're doing it. You're able to do another set, right? Executing it okay. And the funny thing is the better you get at executing it and designing exercises, the more specific it is, the more you're actually taxing things, the less you actually have to do. So you start doing more, it causes more intolerance. And that's the kind of problems that I've run into. So there is a difference between what you can do and what you can tolerate. And I guess what you're saying is how you feel the next day, how you're moving around, how you are, the joint sensations. Those are all insights of how well you're tolerating that thing.
Yeah, the best testimony you can get is when somebody is done with their session or they come in for their next session and you say, first question, how do you feel? How do you feel today? I need to know how you feel today. That's gonna influence how we were going to approach the session today. And they go, I feel great. I feel better than I did when I walked in. And I feel better than I did from the last session. Isn't that the freaking idea of this thing? Yeah, that's exactly what we're supposed to be doing. I don't want someone texting me the next day, dude, can't move, That's not a badge of honor. Anybody can do that to somebody. the whole idea of exercise is to move better, feel better, be stronger, right? But we've been brainwashed with this idea. In order to achieve that, we need to not move as well, hurt more, walk less. Somehow that's going to overcompensate, and the end result is going to be we're going to move better, and it doesn't work that way.
No, yeah. I mean, you can't recover from what you can't tolerate.
Yeah, exactly.
What we say, right?
Perfectly said.
Switching gears real quick, because it does kind of tie into all this. The mental component of this, your mind, your intention when you're lifting, and where you place your focus and how you try to move the weight and what you're moving it with seems to be a thing that's never really discussed. And when you direct someone's mind and intention towards contraction and producing movement through contraction, it seems to transform things for them. Do you tend to do this with your clients, and how quickly do you bring it into the mix, and what's that look like? Maybe talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, right away. Right away. And in fact, I like doing that with people who, let's say, we're getting on a leg extension or something like that. And like, oh yeah, I've done this one. And, they're just kind of throwing it around there. And to get them, I think all exercise should be done with your eyes closed, to be honest with you. I mean, a lot of these sensations are distractions. Like, to get someone to think about, what am I initiating this with, right? Rather than just trying to move the steel, like, build some tension here in these quads and see if we can kind of swell these up. Almost like you're making a fist inside, like you're contracting. You're trying to get someone to contract, not move. When you contract the tissue, movement's going to happen as a side effect. Just moving and hoping things contract isn't the way we need to do this. Contract and the movement happens. You can't move without contraction, right? So it also gets people to stop daydreaming during exercise, right? They're completely focused on the task at hand when they're doing what they're doing. So if you have a yapper in there that likes to just, as they're going through their set, talk, right? Could just totally distracted. Having them focus and feel and sense everything, I think that's huge. It really helps people get a more comfortable with their bodies, more aware of things, more aware of sensations. Over time, they're even really good at telling me what they feel. Like, I can see what I can see from the outside and have an idea what's happening in the inside, but ultimately their sensations, I'll never know more about what's going on in them than they can actually tell me what they sense. They feel this, they feel that, because now that they're controlling things, now that they're sensing things, they're much more aware. And I think that kind of motor control that they're developing is really beneficial to them outside of the gym. So I introduced that right away. That's one of the things that differentiates me from these other places is, this intention. What are you thinking about during exercise? What are you trying to do? What is the goal here? And where is your brain focused? Are you truly executing this thing from the area that you're trying to challenge? Or are you just trying to get done with your set and hoping something worked out for the best? Intention's huge, man. It's absolutely huge. And I think I think like Pilates has probably done somewhat a halfway decent job at doing those. They're very specific. And I've made this comment before. I think you've seen a trend over the last 10 years or so where the personal training world has lost some clients to the Pilates world because it just feels better. It feels better. They're big on control. They're big on awareness. I'm like, we can apply the same stuff here. They don't have a trademark on intention. Like, and we're not limited to like a reformer here. Like we can apply these mindful things and have somebody feeling excellent after their exercise. This doesn't have to be like, well, weight training, lifting, that's for those big dudes for throwing weights around and hurting themselves and all that. But I do Pilates so I can feel, my muscles are going to get longer and I can feel better and all that. We can do that too, right? We can do that too. It doesn't have to be that way. In fact, I have about a woman now, she's about 76. She was referred to me by a great Pilates instructor that used to work with me who left. And I can tell when she walked in, she was apprehensive. She's looking at all these weights around like, this is like a gym. I don't want to lift weights. And man, she's like my biggest fan now. She told me that I just absolutely love coming here. She loves it. She's like, I feel like I'm getting something done. I feel so much better. It just feels like I'm getting stronger, and I sense it during my day when I'm outside, when my knee doesn't hurt as much, my back doesn't hurt as much. And she loves it. She can't wait for the next session. That's perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to accomplish. She's excited about coming in now, and she's focused, completely focused. And it's fun for me too, because she's in it 100%. So I'm in it 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So yeah, it starts with the intention thing. They love it, man. I don't think you can go back to the mindless stuff after you hone in on this. I just don't see it. It's just that much a different experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm 100% on that page as well. So we're running out of time here, but I did want to ask one other thing, because I'm personally curious, because every professional does this differently, and we'll give people some insights on your take on things. How do you track your clients' progress, session to session, but also towards their ultimate goal? Like, how do you take in the data? What kind of data points do you take? Do you take data points?
Mm-hmm. I think first you have to be really, really specific when it comes to why are they here in the first place. They say, you're going to get these general answers, right? I want to get in shape. I want to lose weight. I want to get stronger. What does that mean really, though? Because they might mean getting stronger just means, it seems like every time I try to pick up my grandkid in the air, my back's killing me, and they relate that to being weak. I want to lose weight. Well, do they really want to lose weight, or is it that they had an image in their brain? Like when I was in high school and I weighed this much, I really liked the way I looked. So that means if I get to that weight again, I'll look like that and feel good again. And it's a little bit of a psychology to say, well, let's look at hypothetically here. Let's say you didn't lose any weight, but you looked exactly like how you envisioned yourself looking. Would you be satisfied with that? And they have a hard time grasping it because they've convinced themselves that one equals the other. But eventually they go, yeah, it's really not about the number. I guess if I looked that way, I'd be happy. Good. So now we've already eliminated this idea that it's just about losing 10 pounds. Okay. And what is it that you actually want to be able to do outside of here that you're having issues now that you can't do? Let's define that, right? Like, you're really specific on it. Because I've seen people go up on the weights and everything's getting better and stronger, and a lot of clients will still leave their trainer because in their mind they're not progressing by their standard, with their definition, with their measurement, right? So a lot of it is really, yes, I can track how well someone range of motion might be improving, how well they're controlling that motion. I can look at their the way they own positions. All those things are measurable things, but it's also it really comes down to anecdotal. How the hell do you feel? I'm always asking it. Do you feel better or not? At the end of the day, the anecdotal thing is all that matters. How does this person feel? They feel better or not? So that their feedback is everything, and I ask it probably 100 times each session. How are you feeling? How was that? How do you feel? How was that? Not to be annoying. I want to know, how does that feel? And, when they say this, I noticed that, listen to them. Try to see what and investigate and make it better. And they appreciate that, man. We're not doing magic here. And I'm not going to say that we're going to cure you of all your pain forever and ever. There's a lot of things that influence pain and sensations. But man, it's amazing how when you apply exercise to your body in a controlled way, in a mindful way, how much better people feel. Their personalities can even change. Their attitudes change. They're even more successful in other aspects of their life because they're feeling better, so they're more productive. That's how I measure success. And clearly, if they're coming back, and I've had many clients for 12, 14 years, man. I mean, they wouldn't be doing that if there wasn't something good happening.
For sure. Yeah. It's good to hear a different take on things because, some people are super attached to reps and sets and weights. Yeah. As we know, that all changes day to day based on so many things. And maybe that isn't as important as we're led to believe to track. But, not saying you don't have to, but there's definitely other ways to do it. For sure. So I know you got to get out of here. I do want to make sure that if there are trainers listening to this, where can they find more about you, RTS, and if there are people somewhere in Florida, maybe listening.
Yeah,
to
man.
this.
So I do have a website. It's SVZ, performance. Let's see if I can do this with the camera. Boom, svzperformance.com. And I'm in the midst of kind of revamping that. And starting Saturday, I'll be filming a ton of content that I've been saying I was going to do for probably about 10 years now, but I'm actually doing it. So look out for that. It'll be a YouTube channel. There'll be a lot more social media content. I've been a little quiet on there because I've been waiting for this. So you can find the website. You can find me on Instagram, SVZ Performance, Facebook, SVZ Internal Performance. And if you're interested, if you're a trainer out there and you're interested more about the RTS, I do have a course coming up starting in August. And if you can sign up at least a month early, there is a discount. So you're only a few weeks away from that. So you can look at resistancetrainingspecialist.com, or you could just type in rts123.com. It'll link you to the same site. You do have to register and create an account, and then you go through schedules and courses, and you'll see SVZs come up in Sunrise, Florida. We're teaching that starting in August, and there's 3 courses: August, September, October. So you can find more information there, and that's it. I mean, if anybody wants to reach out to me and shoot me a message on social media, that's a good way to get a hold of me. But yeah, I'm here. I might not get to it right away, but I'll get to you.
Cool, man. Thank you. I just heard your Kaiser compressor kick on.
I don't think that's what that was, because I don't have one. So I don't know.
All right. Well, dude, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate you taking the time. I think we still have a ton to talk about, so maybe we can do another one in the near future.
Yeah, anytime. I appreciate it.
All right, man. Well, I'll let you go, and thanks again. Talk to you soon.
Yeah, man. Thanks.